Big Bang Theory Modification 2, not just a single bang, but a series of bangs. Most likely there were other explosions after the Big Bang. This video is a continuation of the video of Big Bang Theory Modification, a solution to the crisis in cosmology. Like the first video, this video is also intended to find a solution to the crisis in cosmology in order to satisfy curiosity about the origins of the formation of the universe. There are lots of voids in the universe. The universe's component that is normal, or visible matter, only 5%. The rest is the darkness. We who live in one of the normal cosmic objects can see into the darkness through the gaps or voids between other normal components, namely the stars in the Milky Way galaxy. And through the gaps between stars and other cosmic objects from different galaxies. These gaps are numerous in the universe, some are even very large, such as Boötes void. Why are there lots of voids? The existence of these voids shows that cosmic objects are not evenly distributed in the universe. Whereas, with one Big Bang explosion, we expect that the remnants of the explosion can be distributed evenly and move in a straight line, like spokes on the wheel whose path will never cross each other. Logically, voids or empty spaces can form if objects in a location are swept away by something or those objects are thrown of their movement path because they collide with other objects. In fact, a collision will never occur if the movement path of the objects is like spokes on the wheel. Even with a modified Big Bang model, as explained in my previous video, it would still be difficult or even impossible to happen. In the previous video, it is explained how the Big Bang model was modified, its shape of the path of its cosmic object's movement, from straight line to curved. And was modified, the direction of its cosmic object's movement, from moving away from the point of the origin to become towards the point of origin. Therefore, hypothetically, this could only be explained if there were another explosion occurred after the Big Bang. So, this subsequent explosion was what swept objects from their positions and changed the direction of movement of the objects so they were no longer like spokes on the wheel, allowing the objects to collide with each other. When did subsequent explosions occur? To have an impact in such a way as to create a void as big as Boötes void, it is estimated that subsequent explosion occurred not long after the Big Bang, namely during the inflation period or perhaps within a split second from the Big Bang. How could those explosions happen? If the time of this subsequent explosions is a split second from the Big Bang, then it is possible that what exploded was a fraction of the substance in the first explosion. And this fraction is still the same substance as the substance in the first explosion, which of course still consists of the same element, in the sense that decaying has not occurred. How many times did the explosion occur? This will depend on the various sizes of fractions formed from the previous explosion. From previous video, we can conclude that if an explosion occurs, a vacuum energy will be formed which will later form a giant black hole. So, it could be said that black holes are artifacts or remnants from the explosion of cosmic objects. Evidence of this can be seen from the explosion of small cosmic objects, namely exploding stars which then become black holes, as can be seen in this illustration. Some of these black holes are centers of cosmic objects which are arranged in galactical-like pattern, however, there are also those which are stand-alone. The centers of the galactical patterns, that we are familiar with today, are the center of the universe, a center of a multi-supercluster, a center of a supercluster, a center of a galaxy, and center of a dwarf galaxy. Although of course, the explosion we mean is the explosion during the inflation period or split second after the first explosion. Meanwhile, stars that we consider to be fractions of the initial substance, survived or did not explode until the end of the Dark Ages, lighted up, and only explode after their nuclear fuel runs out and become black hole if their size is sufficient. Assuming that the sun and stars come from the same substance, as in the first explosion, or let's call it God substance, and the smallest fragments of that God substance will not explode but it will light up and mark the end of the Dark Ages, then we can assume that God substance explosion will depend on the size. If the size is small, then the fragment will not explode but will light up at the end of the Dark Ages. So, what size of God substance will explode in subsequent? Let's check the explosion artifacts, namely black holes resulting from the explosion. The smallest black holes are black holes that resulted from the explosion of stars. It's just that this explosion did not occur during cosmic inflation, but after passing through the Dark Ages. So, the smallest size fragment of initial material or God substance, that did not explode during the cosmic inflation period, was what will become the embryo of stars. Let's just name this fragment S6. The black hole produced by the explosion of a God substance fragment whose size is larger than S6 is the center of a dwarf galaxy and/or a standalone black hole. We will call this God substance size S5. The black hole produced by the explosion of a God substance fragment which is larger than S5 is the center of a galaxy. We will call this size of the God substance S4. The black hole produced by the explosion of a God substance fragment whose size is larger than S4 is the center of a supercluster. We will call this size of the God substance fragment S3. The black hole produced by the explosion of God substance whose size is larger than the size of S3 is the center of a multi-supercluster. This measure of God substance, we'll just call it S2. The black hole produced by the explosion of God substance which is larger than S2 is the center of the universe, and this is the first explosion or the Big Bang. The God substance is the initial material and not a fragment. Let's just name this initial material as S1. Well, now let's look at the explosion sequence. S1 exploded first and produced fragments of sizes S2, S3, S4, S5, and S6. S2 exploded next, along with S3, S4, S5 resulting from the first session's explosion and produced fragments of size S3, S4, S5, and S6. S3 exploded next at the same time as S4, S5 resulting from the second explosion session and produced fragments of size S4, S5, and S6. S4 exploded next at the same time as S5, resulting from the third explosion session and produced fragments S5 and S6. S5 exploded and produced fragments the size of S6. S6 did not explode, but decaying and lighted up by the end of the Dark Ages. If we assume that the size of the fragment of the God substance that exploded will determine the intensity and the wavelength of the microwave radiation, namely, the larger the fragment size will produce a higher intensity and shorter wavelength or higher microwave frequency compared to the explosions resulted from a smaller fragment, we can describe it with the following illustration. Microwave background radiation after the first explosion or the Big Bang. Microwave background radiation after the second session of explosions. Microwave background radiation after the third session of explosions. Microwave background radiation after the fourth session of explosions. Microwave background radiation after the fifth session of explosions. If the radiation is added up, it is estimated that the intensity lambda will look like this. In a simplified illustration, the sequence of the explosions will look like the followings. The ball numbered 6 in the illustration depicts a fragment of God substance that did not explode during the inflation period but will shine after passing through the Dark Ages. It is the embryo of a star. If the beginning of the universe turns out to be correct as I explained through the Big Bang Theory which has been modified according to my proposal, then the universe will look like the following illustration. If you want to know the explanation of how a black hole forms a galactic structure of cosmic objects, please watch my first video. Big Bang Theory Modification 1, a solution to the crisis in cosmology. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please subscribe, like, and share.